Welcome to our channel, Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. It was called the crime of the century. In 1932, the world's most famous man, Charles Lindbergh, faced a tragedy that shocked the nation. His 20-month-old baby boy was taken from his home in the middle of the night. The search that followed gripped America. Police, reporters, and ordinary people all wanted answers. When the child's body was found, sadness turned to anger, and the hunt for the kidnapper began. The man who was caught, Bruno Hauptmann, said he was innocent, but the trial that followed divided the nation and left questions that still remain today. This is the story of heartbreak, mystery, and justice. The story of the Lindbergh case, the crime that changed America forever. It was a cold night in early March 1932. The wind moved softly through the tall trees outside the Lindbergh home in Hopewell, New Jersey. Inside the large country house, everything seemed peaceful. Charles Lindbergh, the famous pilot, was reading in his study. His wife, Anne Morrow Lindbergh, was upstairs preparing their baby for bed. Their little boy, Charles Jr., was almost 2 years old, a healthy and happy child with bright eyes and soft blonde hair. He was the pride of the Lindbergh family. The house was quiet that night. The baby was placed in his crib around 8 o'clock. The nursemaid, Betty Gow, tucked him in carefully, checked the blankets, and closed the window to keep out the cold. After that, she went downstairs for a short rest. Anne Lindbergh was also relaxing after a long day, and Charles Sr. was busy writing notes at his desk. Nobody had any idea that something terrible was about to happen. Outside the house, darkness covered the yard and the nearby woods. Somewhere in that darkness, a man was moving quietly, carrying a wooden ladder that he had built himself. He placed it against the side of the house, just below the baby's window. The man climbed up slowly, careful not to make a sound. When he reached the window, he opened it with a tool and slipped inside. Inside the nursery, the baby slept peacefully. The man stepped softly on the floor, trying not to wake him. He looked around, saw the small child in the crib, and picked him up. The baby stirred a little but did not cry. The man left the room as quickly as he came. On the windowsill, he left a small envelope with a note inside. Then he climbed down the ladder, holding the baby in one arm. When he reached the ground, something went wrong. The ladder shook. One of the rungs broke, and the man almost fell. The baby may have been hurt then, though no one knew it at the time. Still, the man ran into the dark woods and disappeared. Upstairs, no one had heard the noise. For another hour, the house stayed calm. Around 10 o'clock, Betty Gow went upstairs to check on the baby. When she looked into the crib, her heart froze. The bed was empty. The blankets were pushed aside. She looked around the room in confusion, thinking maybe Mrs. Lindbergh had moved the baby. She ran downstairs and asked Anne where the baby was. Anne looked surprised and said, "Isn't he in his crib?" Then panic filled the house. Charles Lindbergh ran upstairs and saw the empty crib with his own eyes. On the windowsill, he noticed the envelope. He opened it quickly. The letter inside was written in poor English and full of strange spellings. It said the baby had been kidnapped and would be returned only if the Lindberghs paid $50,000 in cash. The note warned them not to tell the police or something terrible would happen to the child. Lindbergh's hands shook as he read the letter. He called the police right away despite the warning. Within an hour, officers arrived at the house. Reporters soon heard the news, and by midnight, the Lindbergh home was surrounded by police cars and flashing lights. The peaceful country house had become the center of a nightmare. The police searched the yard and found the broken ladder near the window. They also found footprints in the soft ground, but the prints were not clear enough to tell whose they were. Investigators collected the ransom note as evidence. It had been written in pencil on cheap paper with uneven letters and symbols that looked like a signature made of circles and dots. The writer seemed to be a foreigner because of the grammar and spelling mistakes. Inside the house, Anne Lindbergh was crying quietly. Friends and neighbors came to comfort her, but nothing could calm her. Charles Lindbergh tried to stay strong. He was a national hero, a man who had crossed the Atlantic Ocean alone, but now he faced something even harder, the loss of his only child. Reporters called it the crime of the century, and soon the whole country was talking about it. The next morning, police officers from all over New Jersey came to help. The FBI also joined the case. The story was in every newspaper. People everywhere were shocked. Many sent letters and offers to help. Some claimed they had seen strange cars near the Lindbergh home that night. Others said they had information about the kidnappers. Most of these reports led nowhere. A few days later, another letter came to the Lindberghs. It had the same strange handwriting and symbols as the first note. The kidnapper demanded that the ransom money be paid in small bills, mostly $20 and $10 notes, and said more instructions would follow. Lindbergh was desperate. He just wanted his baby back. He agreed to pay whatever they asked. Police advised him to be careful, but Lindbergh believed he could handle the situation. He was used to challenges and thought this might be solved through negotiation. Over the next few weeks, more letters arrived, each with new directions. The kidnapper told the Lindberghs to have the money ready but to wait for a secret signal before delivering it. He also warned again not to contact the police too much. During this time, the Lindberghs received many fake offers from people pretending to know the kidnappers. Some just wanted money or attention. Others truly believed they could help. One man named Dr. John Condon, a retired teacher from the Bronx, offered to act as a go-between. He even placed an ad in the newspaper saying he would deliver the ransom. Strangely, the kidnapper replied to his message through another letter. The kidnapper agreed to meet him. Dr. Condon and the kidnapper, who called himself John, arranged a meeting at a cemetery late at night. Condon followed the instructions carefully and went there with fear and hope. In the dark, a man appeared. He spoke with a German accent and kept his face hidden. The man told Condon that the baby was safe and would be returned after the ransom was paid. He gave more instructions for the money drop. Condon returned and told Lindbergh everything. The Lindberghs followed the directions. On April 2, 1932, the ransom was paid, $50,000 in marked gold certificates. Lindbergh believed his baby would be returned soon. But days passed, then weeks, and there was no sign of little Charles Jr. The letters stopped coming. The hope that had filled their hearts slowly faded. Anne sat by the window each night, looking out at the trees, wishing she could hear her baby's laughter again. Charles stayed busy with the police, trying to hide his pain behind his famous calm expression. The world waited with him, praying that the story would have a happy ending. But deep down, many feared the worst. Days turned into weeks, and the Lindbergh family still waited for news. The police kept searching the forests, rivers, and nearby towns, but there was no sign of the missing child. Every time the telephone rang, Anne Lindbergh's heart raced. She hoped someone would tell her that her baby had been found safe. But each time it was only more questions, false leads, or cruel strangers pretending to have information. Charles Lindbergh tried to stay strong for his wife. He met with detectives every day. He studied maps and letters, hoping to find some clue the police might have missed. He believed that if he worked hard enough, he could bring his son home. But even the bravest man could not fight the terrible silence that followed. There were no more letters from the kidnapper. The trail had gone cold. Then, on a warm day in May 1932, a truck driver walking near the woods about 4 miles from the Lindbergh home made a terrible discovery. He saw something near the edge of the trees. When he looked closer, he realized it was the small body of a child. The police were called right away. When they arrived, they confirmed the unthinkable truth. The body was that of Charles Lindbergh Jr. The child had been dead for weeks. The doctor said he had been struck on the head, likely the same night he was taken. The baby's clothes matched what he had been wearing the night of the kidnapping. Charles and Anne were heartbroken. Their hope was gone. The whole world mourned with them. Newspapers printed sad headlines, and people everywhere sent letters of sympathy to the Lindbergh family. The nation was shocked. How could anyone hurt the child of such a respected and beloved man? Charles Lindbergh was not just a pilot. He was a symbol of courage and progress. Now he was a father who had lost his only son to a cruel and mysterious crime. The search for the kidnapper became even more urgent. The police promised justice. Investigators focused on the ransom money. The bills had been carefully recorded by serial number before being handed over. The money included many gold certificates, which were still used at that time but were becoming less common. The police believed that whoever spent those bills might lead them to the killer. For the next 2 years, banks and stores all over the country watched for the ransom bills. Some were found in New York City, others in nearby towns. Each time one appeared, the police followed the trail, but it always ended without answers. The person using the bill had simply received it from someone else. The clues seemed to go nowhere. Then, in September 1934, a small piece of luck changed everything. A gas station in New York received a $10 gold certificate that matched one of the ransom serial numbers. The station clerk noticed the strange bill and wrote down the car's license plate number before the driver left. That note led the police to a man named Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Hauptmann was a German immigrant who worked as a carpenter. He lived in the Bronx with his wife Anna. When police searched his garage, they made a shocking discovery. Over $14,000 of the Lindbergh ransom money was hidden inside a wooden box. When they questioned him, Hauptmann said the money had been left to him by a friend who had died. But the police did not believe him. They arrested him and charged him with kidnapping and murder. The news spread quickly. Newspapers called him the Lindbergh baby killer. Reporters surrounded his house, taking pictures of him and his wife. Crowds gathered outside the jail shouting for justice. The people were angry and wanted someone to blame. For many, Hauptmann seemed like the perfect villain, a foreigner with a secret stash of ransom money. The trial began in January 1935 in the small town of Flemington, New Jersey. People came from all over the country to watch. The courthouse was packed every day. Reporters filled every seat, and radio stations gave updates on the case. It was called the Trial of the Century. The Lindberghs attended some of the sessions, sitting quietly as they listened to the evidence. The prosecution worked hard to prove Hauptmann's guilt. They showed the ransom money found in his home. They brought in experts who said that the handwriting on the ransom notes matched Hauptmann's handwriting. Another expert said the wooden ladder used in the kidnapping was made from wood taken from Hauptmann's attic. The grain patterns matched perfectly. These details made a strong case against him, but Hauptmann insisted he was innocent. He said he had never seen the baby or been near the Lindbergh house. He said his friend, a man named Isidor Fish, had left the money with him before dying in Germany. The defense argued that the police had no direct proof that Hauptmann had kidnapped or killed the child. They said the evidence was weak and that the police wanted to solve the case quickly to satisfy the public. Despite his protests, the jury seemed convinced by the evidence and the emotion of the case. Many Americans believed that the Lindbergh family deserved closure. After weeks of testimony and arguments, the jury reached its decision. On February 13, 1935, Bruno Richard Hauptmann was found guilty of kidnapping and murder. The judge sentenced him to death. Hauptmann's wife, Anna, never stopped saying he was innocent. She wrote letters, gave interviews, and begged for a new trial. Many people supported her, believing that maybe her husband had not received a fair chance. But Charles Lindbergh and most of the public believed justice had been done. The pain of losing their son was still deep, and they wanted the man responsible to pay for it. After the trial, Lindbergh tried to escape the constant attention from reporters and the curious public. He and his wife moved away, first to Europe and later back to America years later. They wanted peace and privacy. The case had changed their lives forever. Charles, once seen as the brave and smiling hero of the skies, now carried a quiet sadness wherever he went. In 1936, Bruno Richard Hauptmann was executed in the electric chair at the New Jersey State Prison. He refused to confess, even at the end. He said, "I am absolutely innocent of the crime." Some people believed him. Others said he was lying. Either way, the world would never be the same after that. Even after the execution, questions remained. Some of the ransom money was still missing. Some people wondered if Hauptmann had an accomplice. Others believed the real kidnapper had never been caught. Books, films, and radio shows told different versions of the story. For years, people argued about what really happened that night in Hopewell, New Jersey. The tragedy of the Lindbergh baby became a dark chapter in American history. It changed the way police handled kidnappings. A new law, called the Lindbergh Law, made kidnapping a federal crime if the victim was taken across state lines. The government promised that such a crime would never go unanswered again. But for Charles and Anne Lindbergh, no law or punishment could erase their pain. They had lost their first child in a cruel and senseless way. Though they went on to have other children, the memory of little Charles Jr. never faded. His empty nursery, the broken ladder, and the soft night wind outside their home would forever remind them of that terrible night, the night that changed everything. Even after the trial and execution of Bruno Hauptmann, the Lindbergh case did not rest. People everywhere continued to talk about it. Some believed that justice had been served, while others felt that an innocent man had died. The newspapers still printed stories about the case, and reporters tried to find new evidence or new witnesses. The mystery of what really happened on that cold night in 1932 never completely went away. In the years after the tragedy, Charles and Anne Lindbergh tried to rebuild their lives. The pain of losing their child was always with them, but they had to keep living. They decided to leave the United States for a while. The attention from the public and the constant newspaper stories were too much to bear. In 1935, they moved to Europe, hoping to find peace and privacy. In Europe, they lived for a time in England and then in France. Charles continued to fly and study airplanes. He was still one of the most famous men in the world, but now he avoided the spotlight. Anne wrote books and took care of their growing family. They had more children, but the shadow of the past never left them. Sometimes at night, Anne would think about the small boy she had lost and wonder what kind of person he might have become. Meanwhile, in America, people kept studying the Lindbergh case. Journalists, lawyers, and even former police officers looked for mistakes in the investigation. Some said that the police had been too eager to arrest someone. They pointed out that the evidence against Hauptmann was mostly circumstantial. The ladder, the handwriting, and the money, none of it proved beyond doubt that he was the kidnapper. Others said the evidence was clear and that justice had been done. The arguments went on for decades. Some people believed that Hauptmann had not acted alone. They thought he might have had help, maybe from someone who knew the Lindberghs or someone who had inside information about the house. The idea of an accomplice became a popular theory. A few even said that the crime had been planned by a larger group of criminals. But no proof ever appeared. In the 1950s and 1960s, new books and television shows brought the story back into public discussion. Reporters interviewed old witnesses and searched for forgotten police files. Some of these reports claimed that certain evidence had been hidden or destroyed. Others suggested that the real kidnapper might still have been alive. Each time a new theory appeared, the Lindbergh family was forced to relive their pain again. Charles Lindbergh did not like to talk about the case. He rarely gave interviews about it. When people asked him questions, he would answer politely but briefly. He focused on his work in aviation and on his family. Over the years, he helped develop new airplane technology and worked with several companies and governments. During World War II, his public image became complicated because of his political views. But his achievements in flight still inspired many people. Anne Morrow Lindbergh became a respected writer. Her books and journals showed her deep thoughts about life, love, and loss. She wrote about nature, motherhood, and the search for peace after tragedy. Her quiet strength touched readers all over the world. Even though she rarely spoke about her son's death, her writing often reflected the pain she had carried for so long. As time passed, the Lindbergh case became more than just a crime story. It became a symbol of the fears and hopes of an entire nation. In the early 1930s, America was going through hard times, the Great Depression, unemployment, and growing uncertainty. The kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby seemed to capture all the sadness and worry of that era. The crime showed how even the most famous and powerful people could not escape tragedy. In the years that followed, many new laws and changes came because of the case. The Lindbergh Law, officially called the Federal Kidnapping Act, made kidnapping a serious federal crime. It allowed the FBI to take charge of such investigations, especially when criminals crossed state lines. Police methods also improved. Detectives began to use better systems for collecting and studying evidence. Fingerprinting, handwriting analysis, and tracking of ransom money all became more advanced because of lessons learned from the Lindbergh investigation. But no law could erase what had happened. For the Lindberghs, the case was not a story. It was a wound that never healed. Even years later, people sometimes sent letters or asked questions about it. The couple always answered with dignity, but avoided reopening old pain. They tried to give their other children a normal, happy life, far from the sadness of the past. Bruno Hauptmann's wife, Anna, spent the rest of her life trying to clear her husband's name. She traveled across the country, meeting lawyers and journalists, begging them to look at the evidence again. Some people believed her. They thought that maybe Hauptmann had truly been a victim of bad luck and public anger. Others believed the opposite, that he had been guilty and deserved his fate. Anna Hauptmann never gave up. She continued her fight until her death in the 1990s. By then, the Lindbergh case had become a part of American history. It was studied in schools, written about in books, and shown in films. Each version told the story a little differently, but the heart of it was always the same. A child taken, a family broken, and a nation shocked. The words "crime of the century" still fit. Even decades later, Charles Lindbergh lived a long life, passing away in 1974. He spent his final years quietly, close to nature, far from the noise of fame. Anne lived until 2001, continuing to write and reflect on the world around her. Together, they had built a life beyond tragedy, but they never forgot the little boy who had once smiled in his crib on that cold March evening. The Lindbergh baby's short life and tragic death left a mark on the world. It reminded people of how fragile life could be. It also showed how far people would go to seek justice, and how hard it can be to know the full truth. Even now, almost a century later, the story still raises questions. Was Hauptmann truly guilty? Did he have help? Or was he an easy target in a desperate search for someone to blame? No one may ever know the complete truth. The evidence, the letters, and the memories have faded with time. But the story of the Lindbergh case continues to live on, not only because of its mystery, but because of the people at its heart: a brave pilot, a loving mother, a small child, and a nation that felt their loss. In the end, the Lindbergh case is remembered not just as a crime, but as a tragedy that changed history. It taught people about the importance of careful justice, the danger of public pressure, and the deep pain that can come from loss. Above all, it showed that even heroes are human, and that behind every headline, there are hearts that break, love that endures, and questions that never find answers. The Lindbergh case ended long ago, but its shadow still remains. It was more than a crime. It was a moment that broke the heart of a nation. Charles and Anne Lindbergh carried their pain for the rest of their lives, and the questions about what truly happened were never fully answered. The case changed American law, it changed police work, and it changed how people saw justice. Even after all these years, the story reminds us that fame cannot protect anyone from tragedy, and that some mysteries may never be solved. The Lindbergh case will always be remembered as the crime that shocked the world and touched every heart that heard it. Subscribe to Crime Loom, and join us as we unravel more heists, mysteries, and untold legends.